Hi, I'm Kaylin. The night my husband threw me and our daughters out, he laughed, "Enjoy your gas station trash heap." His mistress moved in before our toothbrushes had even cooled. They called me a failure, a joke. But beneath those cracked floors and oil stains was a secret worth $200 million. And now the house they stole, empty. The life they mocked, mine, and their voices, gone. I spent the entire afternoon preparing the table. Nothing fancy, just a simple roast chicken with carrots, mashed potatoes, and the cranberry sauce the girls liked. I lit a small candle and laid out 4 plates, plus 2 kid sets. It was the week of Thanksgiving, and for once, I wanted to feel like we had something to be thankful for. Seth's parents were supposed to come over at 6. I wore my nicest sweater, the burgundy one that didn't quite hide the frayed sleeves. I even brushed Amelie's hair twice and let June help me fold napkins, which ended up looking like crushed envelopes. But she was proud, and that's what mattered. At 6:12, their BMW pulled into the gravel driveway. I watched from the kitchen window as Seth stepped out first, crisp in his navy polo. His parents followed, both in wool coats and sunglasses, even though the sun had dipped behind the ridge an hour ago. They didn't bring wine or dessert, just a plastic bag from some upscale place in town. "Don't bother plating anything," Seth's mom said as she breezed in. "We picked up bison sliders from Dax and Barlow." I blinked. "Oh, I cooked dinner." She sniffed the air. "That's cute." Seth kissed my cheek absently, then walked straight to the living room. "Game's on," he called, already kicking his shoes off and plopping down like he owned the place, which technically he did. His name was on everything. I stood there, still holding a potholder in my left hand. At the table, the girls stared at the chicken. Amelie whispered, "Can we still eat yours, Mommy?" "Of course," I said gently, placing the bird in the center. But nobody else touched it. Seth's father opened his takeout box and took a loud bite. "So," he said, mouth half full, "I hear you inherited a dump." I smiled tightly. "It's an old gas station off Route 66. Granddad left it to me." Seth chuckled from the couch. "Even a trash heap has more value than that place." His mother faked a laugh. "What are you gonna do, pump gas in heels?" My heart sank, but I didn't want to ruin the mood. "He believed in me," I said softly. "Said it could be a fresh start." Seth's mom sipped her sparkling water. "That station is the perfect place for someone like you, stuck and invisible." I looked down at my plate. The cranberry sauce had congealed. No one noticed when I stopped eating. Amelie kept glancing at me. June looked confused. She was too young to understand sarcasm, but she sensed something was wrong. After dinner, while the girls were watching a movie in their room, Seth cornered me in the kitchen. The candle had burned down to a stub, flickering against the grease-splattered backsplash. He didn't even lower his voice. "I want you to sell that garbage and give me the money." I turned, slowly. "What?" "I've carried this family long enough," he snapped. "You sit here playing house while I break my back for us. You think that place means something? It's junk. Sell it. We need the money for the SUV lease, and Dad's been eyeing a property in Sedona." I stared at him. "It's all I have left of Granddad." Seth's jaw tensed. "Kaylin, don't be dramatic." "I'm not selling it." His voice rose. "You'll never be more than a failure." The words hit harder than I expected. Amelie appeared in the hallway, clutching her stuffed llama. Her eyes were wide. Seth stormed out the front door and didn't come back that night. I tucked the girls into bed. June mumbled something about wanting a story, but fell asleep before I could open the book. Amelie slid something under my hand, a folded piece of printer paper. On the front, it said, "Happy Birthday, Mommy," in shaky pink marker. Inside, a crayon drawing of a house with flowers and a dog and us, just us, under a blue sky. Underneath, she'd written, "One day, we'll have a home again." I kissed her forehead and whispered, "Thank you, baby." When the house went quiet, I slipped into the small guest room and placed the card beneath my pillow. I lay there listening to the wind tugging at the window frame, the old walls creaking like bones. Outside, the road glowed faintly beneath the streetlight, the same road that led out to the station. I didn't know it then, but that trash heap was about to become my only sanctuary. I barely slept that night. Not from the ache in my chest, though that lingered like a bruise you can't rub away, but from the weight of everything left unsaid. I kept replaying his words. "You'll never be more than a failure," as if they were stitched into the dark above our ceiling fan. Amelie's birthday card still lay under my pillow. I touched it once like a lifeline, before slipping quietly out of bed. The sky hadn't cracked open yet, just that pre-dawn hush, where everything feels both too early and too late. I crept into the kitchen and started making lunch for the girls. Peanut butter sandwiches, cut diagonally, just how they liked them. Carrot sticks, a couple apples. I didn't have the heart to pack chips. It felt wrong to give them anything crunchy while everything around us felt so fragile. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Seth stood in the hallway, arms crossed, still in his undershirt. The light caught on the steel in his gaze. "You still don't get it, do you?" he said, voice flat like a tire on gravel. I didn't answer, just zipped up the lunch bags and slid them into their faded backpacks. That morning, I told the girls we'd be heading to the station after school pickup. "Just for a little cleanup," I said with a smile I didn't believe myself. Amelie nodded, always the watchful one. Lila just asked if there'd be snacks. I kissed their foreheads as they headed to the bus stop and stood at the window long after they'd disappeared down the road. The quiet inside the house was too clean, too final. By the time the afternoon sun bent westward, I'd made a quick run to Dollar General for cleaning rags and gloves. The girls ran out of the school doors like light breaking through clouds, their hair wild in the wind, still untouched by what was coming. We pulled into the driveway and I noticed something immediately. The porch light was off. That light had always been on when we were out. Always. I walked up to the front door and tried the knob. It didn't budge. Confused, I jiggled it again, harder this time. Then I heard the lock slide from the other side, and the door creaked open. A woman, maybe mid-30s, with overplucked eyebrows and too much perfume, leaned casually against the frame. She held a steaming mug of coffee and smiled like she was expecting company. "You must be Kaylin," she said. "He said you'd show up." I stared at her. For a second, I wasn't sure what planet I was standing on. Behind her, I saw Seth. He leaned against the banister with a smug sort of calm, like a landlord dealing with an overstayed tenant. "This is my house now," he said. "You can go live in your station." Lila grabbed my hand. Amelie looked back and forth between us, trying to understand what this all meant. "Where are our clothes?" I managed to ask, the words scraping past the dryness in my throat. Seth didn't flinch. "You'll find a suitcase on the steps. That's all I'm giving you. Be grateful I didn't call the cops." I turned and there it was, a single blue suitcase, stained near the handle, with one broken zipper. The same one we used for our beach trip 5 years ago, the last time we had what resembled joy. The neighbors were peeking through curtains, one of them even stepping out onto her porch, her arms folded across her chest like judgment itself. I didn't cry, not in front of them. I picked up the suitcase with one hand and reached for Amelie with the other. Seth called out as we walked toward the borrowed pickup I'd left on the curb earlier that day. "Oh, and Kaylin?" he said. "Don't come back, ever." The truck's engine struggled as it started, like it too, didn't want to move forward. I glanced at the dashboard. The gas needle hovered just above empty. We drove in silence for a while. Amelie clutched Lila's backpack like it was the last safe thing in the world. I kept my eyes on the road, blinking hard every time the tears threatened to rise. We pulled into the old gas station just as dusk settled, turning the sky that soft, uncertain blue. It looked even smaller than I remembered. Weeds curled up through the cracks in the pavement. The windows were smudged with time and dust. One shutter hung half loose like it had given up. I parked the truck behind the building, out of sight. The air smelled of dry earth and forgotten things. Inside, it was musty. Wood, oil, and something old, like memories gone sour. But it was ours. I found an old broom in the corner and swept a patch clear. The girls sat on a folded blanket I laid down, too tired to ask questions, too drained to cry. I sat beside them and pulled their small bodies into mine, pressing my lips to their hair. "I promise," I whispered, "we'll rise from this." They drifted off to sleep with their hands resting against my ribs like they were trying to hold me together from the outside in. I sat awake for hours, watching the moonlight spill across the dusty floor, listening to every creak and whisper of the building. The quiet wasn't peaceful. It was echoing. It forced me to sit with everything I had lost. But it also whispered something else. This wasn't the end. It was just the bottom. And I hadn't even seen how deep the basement went yet. I thought we'd hit rock bottom, but rock bottom had a basement I wasn't ready for. A week passed, slow and heavy, like trying to walk through water. Mornings started the same. I'd blink awake on the hard floor, neck stiff, spine aching, with the distant sound of a train whistle cutting through the cracked windows of the old gas station. My girls lay curled up beside me under two mismatched blankets donated by someone kind enough to leave them by the back door. I never saw who. No note, just the gesture. We were surviving on peanut butter crackers, canned peaches, and prayers. Some nights we'd heat beans on a camping stove one of the neighbors dropped off. I never asked for help, they just showed up. Bags of clothes, a flashlight, a first aid kit. People saw what Seth did, and while no one said a word to my face, their silence told its own story. "We see you. We just don't want to get involved." I didn't blame them. Each morning I got up before the girls. I'd press my palm to their foreheads, check for warmth, like muscle memory from when they were toddlers. Then I'd step out to the pump lot and stretch my arms above my head, breathing in the dry air that smelled like rust, weeds, and old oil. The sun came up slow, painting the concrete in gold and making the gas station almost look like something out of a postcard, if you squinted past the boarded windows and peeling paint. One morning, after scraping together breakfast from half a granola bar and a dusty orange, I told the girls I was going to try cleaning out the back room. "You stay where I can see you," I said, pointing to the small patch of grass where some dandelions had pushed through. They nodded, too tired to argue. The storage closet had been locked when we arrived, but the hinges were so corroded I didn't need a key, just a wrench and a bit of stubbornness. I pushed the door open, the smell of mildew and time hitting me like a slap. Old tools, a broken vacuum, stacks of faded receipts and plastic bins covered in grime. I tied my shirt over my nose and started sorting. An hour in, I was on my knees scrubbing a moldy corner when I noticed something strange. The floor didn't feel right, not like the rest of the station's concrete. This section creaked under my weight. I stood, tapped it with a broom handle. Hollow. I dropped to all fours and pried at the edge with a crowbar someone had left behind. One plank splintered and gave way, revealing metal, a rusted handle, a square outline. My pulse quickened. I brushed away more dirt and found an old tarp half covering what looked like a sealed hatch. There, wedged between the boards and the metal frame, was a tube, aluminum about the length of my forearm. It looked like something from an old movie. I twisted the cap off with effort, hands trembling. Inside was a rolled-up document, yellowed with age, but intact. Typed across the top in faded ink, "RT Holdings, Emergency Dossier." I stared at the words for a long time, like they might blink or vanish if I breathed too hard. My mind raced with possibilities. What was this place before it became a rundown station? Why would anything need to be sealed like this? But more than that, why had Seth been so adamant that this property was worthless? I sat on a cracked milk crate near the door, tube in one hand, staring at the hatch like it might open itself. Part of me didn't want to know. Part of me needed to. That night, after putting the girls to bed, I sat in the back room with a flashlight, knees pulled up to my chest. I didn't open the tube again, I just stared at the hatch. It was still locked, but the seal had long rusted over. I could probably break it with some effort. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. Instead, I scrolled through my old contacts and found a number I hadn't dialed in years. Marcus, a guy I went to high school with who now did locksmithing and safe work. Last time I saw him was at a fundraiser car wash. He owed me a favor from way back. I tapped out a message. Hey Marcus, it's Kaylin. Need you for something weird. Discreet. You free next week? The response came 10 minutes later. Damn, Kaylin, you still exist? You got it. Wednesday, okay? I exhaled slowly. Yeah, I whispered to myself, closing the phone. Wednesday's fine. Before heading to bed, I laid the plank back down over the hatch and rearranged the boxes. Didn't want the girls stumbling over it. Outside, the wind had picked up. I heard it whistle through the broken pump hoses and rattle the thin metal awning. But inside, the girls were giggling. Real giggles, the kind that hadn't touched their lips since we were thrown out like trash. They were chasing each other through the weeds, turning dandelions into confetti. No school, no phones, no fancy clothes, but they were laughing. I leaned against the doorway and let myself smile. For the first time in days, it reached my eyes. And then I whispered to no one, "Whatever's under there, please be our way out." The night he came, the air was heavy and quiet, the kind of stillness that wraps around your skin like cold cloth. I stayed up with a flashlight and a dull kitchen knife in my pocket, just in case. When the knock finally came, it was soft, barely 2 taps. I opened the side door to find Sam Bradshaw standing there, older than I remembered from high school, with a small toolkit in hand and a look that said, "Don't ask, I won't tell." I said I owed you, he mumbled, stepping in and brushing the dust off his jeans. Didn't think it'd be at some ghost station at midnight. Didn't think I'd be the one calling either, I said. Follow me. We crept past my daughters sleeping in the corner of the office, curled up under 2 mismatched quilts. The floor creaked as we moved into the storage room. I flicked on the camping lantern, and Sam squatted by the spot I'd marked with tape earlier. "That the hatch?" he whispered. I nodded. "Found it cleaning out the closet. Lock's rusted shut." He rubbed his chin. "Shouldn't take long. These old things were built more for keeping rats out than secrets in." He worked silently, just the soft clicking of tools and the occasional grunt. My heart thudded louder with each minute. I kept glancing toward the front windows, half expecting headlights or worse, him. After maybe 15 minutes, there was a soft clink, and Sam leaned back. "She's open." I took a shaky breath. Together, we pulled the hatch up. It groaned like something ancient was waking up. Below it, a metal compartment, maybe 4 feet deep, was packed with dusty filing boxes, an old lockbox with a busted handle, and what looked like a sealed blueprint cylinder. "You want me to stay while you go through it?" he asked. I shook my head. "You've done enough. I'll take it from here." He nodded, handed me a small flashlight, and walked out the back without another word. I waited until I heard his truck pull away before I reached into the compartment and carefully pulled out the first box. The cardboard gave a little, damp with time and age, but it held. Inside, folders, deeds, some letters, all stamped with the same name, R.T. Holdings. I sat on the cold concrete, hands trembling, flipping through papers under the lantern's soft glow. A deed transfer dated 1999. Mineral rights agreements, lease projections. One sheet had big, blocky handwriting across the top. Projected yield, S-Duran 240, natural gas and rare earths. I stared at it like it might burn a hole through me. That couldn't be right. I kept digging, my breath shallow. One sealed envelope, thick and yellowed with time, had a label for the rightful inheritor, if found. I didn't open it right away. I just sat there, legs cramping, staring at it like it might whisper the truth if I stared hard enough. Then finally, I broke the seal. Inside were copies of documents, a corporate lease showing that the land beneath this broken station sat atop an untouched gas reserve, still untapped, a map marked with old survey routes, another page with a typed note. "If you're reading this, it means you weren't supposed to be kept away, but someone tried. This land was yours, Kaylin. Not theirs. Not ever theirs. Keep it hidden until you're ready to fight." I blinked. My name was there, in the corner, handwritten in faded ink. The date was just 3 months before Uncle Raymond died. I hadn't seen him since I was 10. He used to send postcards, and then one day he stopped. My fingers pressed against the paper, trying to ground myself. So, all this time, it was never just an abandoned station. It was inheritance. It was power. It was a secret someone tried very hard to bury, and I had a pretty good guess who. That explains the sudden push from my husband, the urgency, the gaslighting. "It's worthless," he'd said. "It's a waste of time, of money." No, he knew. He always knew. That's why he laughed when the property got dumped on me. That's why he walked out the door like I was nothing. I opened the small lockbox. Inside was a rusty key, a flash drive, and one more letter, shorter than the rest. "Never sign anything until you know what's under your feet." I laughed, not out of joy, out of bitter disbelief. I sat for hours, sorting, scanning, making digital backups on my old laptop. Every time I touched a document, I felt like I was touching fire, small truths that had been hidden under the dust for years. When the girls stirred in their sleep, I slipped the files back into the hatch and closed it. I laid the old plank back over, just like I found it, but nothing felt the same anymore. Outside, dawn was peeking through the cracked blinds. The weeds behind the station were catching golden light, and my daughters, bless their spirits, were chasing each other barefoot like nothing had changed. But everything had. I looked at them. My jaw clenched. "So that's why they mocked me," I whispered. "That's why they tried to drive us out." This wasn't just about a broken marriage or a rundown property. It was about betrayal, ownership, and now, proof. I didn't go home that night. Not really. I went back to the small, rented unit behind the old bakery, a place with thin walls, the smell of burnt flour in the carpet, and a window that stuck halfway shut. But it was mine. I sat on the edge of the fold-out couch and stared at the scanned documents glowing from my laptop screen. For hours, I said nothing, just sat there, listening to the buzz of the fridge and the occasional bark from the neighbor's dog. 2 days later, I found myself at a corner booth in a diner that hadn't changed since 1987, worn red leather seats, plastic menus, and a waitress named Jolene who still wore a pin with a smiley face. It was just after the lunch rush, quiet enough for real conversation, but busy enough to not draw attention. Maya arrived with 2 coffees in hand and a look on her face that said, "You were right to call." She slid into the seat across from me, placed 1 mug in front of me, and pulled the manila envelope from her bag without a word. "I owe you more than a burger," I said, trying to sound casual. My voice still felt like sandpaper. Maya shook her head. "I'm billing you in pancakes. Let's get to it." I pushed my laptop across the table, the screen open to the scan of the lease and mineral documents. She took a breath, clicked through each page, and then paused. "If they thought this land was worthless," I asked, "why fight me so hard over it?" She didn't answer right away. She scrolled again, squinting, mouth tightening. "Because it's not worthless, it's a sleeping giant." Maya leaned in. "That lease? It's active, still valid. The mineral rights alone, if those surveys hold, could bring in hundreds of millions over time, and based on this deed transfer from Raymond Thorne to you, you're the legal heir." I sat back. The leather squeaked beneath me. "They knew," I whispered. "They mocked me, made jokes about my cursed land, but they knew." Maya nodded slowly. Or someone did, maybe not all of them, but someone. The waitress came by with pie samples. Neither of us touched them, and suddenly, uninvited, my mind slipped backward. A flash of white orchids, the smell of bourbon and hairspray, our wedding night. I remembered standing outside the country club ballroom with Ethan and his father. The music still floated through the open doors. Frank Sinatra, too slow, too grand for the mood I had. His father had leaned in with a laugh and said, "Now that she's yours, steer her right. She doesn't know her place yet." Ethan didn't flinch, didn't even blink. He just smirked, sipped his drink, and said, "She will." I remembered freezing then, just for a second, like something sharp had touched my spine. But I had brushed it off, told myself it was just old-school Southern manners. That not everything needed to feel modern or woke to be loving. But love doesn't start with obedience, and control disguised as charm? That's just a leash in a velvet box. Back at the diner, Maya tapped her envelope. "There's more." I leaned in. She slid out a folded printout. "I pulled this from the county clerk's office. The prenup Ethan made you sign? It's not there." I frowned. "That can't be right. We signed it the week before the wedding. I remember he had his father's attorney present. They watched me sign." "Yes, but it was never filed. No official submission, no timestamp, no notary seal on record, which means, legally, it doesn't exist." I stared at her. She said it again, slower. "You are not bound by that agreement. You have a case for half of every shared asset, including the property, the savings account, and the house he kicked you out of." I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I just sat there, letting the information land like cold rain on a roof I hadn't known was leaking. "Why wouldn't they file it?" I murmured. "That's stupid." "Or strategic," Maya replied. "If they never thought you'd leave, it wouldn't matter. The prenup would just be a scare tactic, control in paper form." I thought of Ethan's smug tone every time we fought. "You have nothing. I protected what's mine." Turns out, he protected air. I finished my coffee, set the mug down slowly. Maya gave me a look I knew well. She had worn it back in college, right before delivering an opening argument that left mock trial judges speechless. "Kaylin," she said gently, "you're holding all the cards. You don't need a war. You need a strategy." I nodded. When we stood to leave, she hugged me without asking. And that meant more than anything she'd said. Outside, the late afternoon sun painted long shadows across the sidewalk. I didn't go home. Not yet. I walked 3 blocks to the small business center where I used to meet clients before Ethan pressured me to quit. There, in the parking lot, I pulled out my phone and dialed the number Maya had circled. Not Ethan, not his father. A women-owned real estate law firm, one that didn't flinch at inheritance wars or whispered threats. The receptionist answered warmly. I said, "I'd like to schedule a consultation. Quiet, but urgent." And as I ended the call, I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I wasn't the broken wife anymore. I was the woman they should have never underestimated. I stepped out of the law office just as the afternoon light began to shift toward amber. My heels clicked softly against the marble floor, but the real echo was in my chest. I didn't feel triumphant, not yet, but I felt centered. Maya had been right, and now the new firm confirmed it. The prenup Ethan waved around like a trophy had never been filed. And worse, for him, he hadn't disclosed the potential land value. That wasn't just negligence. That was calculated. I paused on the front steps of the building, watching cars roll by slowly. My fingers closed around the sealed folder in my bag, the one I'd be mailing later, not out of spite, but to set the clock ticking. "Let's keep it quiet," I'd told the firm's partner, a tall, no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper tone. "I want to see how far he digs before he hits the hole he made himself." She'd smiled at that. "You're more strategic than most clients who come through here, Kaylin." I didn't respond. Strategy came from survival, from years of listening without speaking, from being told to stay sweet when my stomach twisted with truths no one else wanted to name. After grabbing a tea to go from the corner cafe, I headed toward the edge of town where the gas station still stood, at least what was left of it. The demolition crew had already begun clearing the debris and surrounding brush. Orange tape and survey flags dotted the property like scattered crumbs. It looked like nothing to the untrained eye, but to someone who understood county plans and traffic flow maps, it screamed opportunity. I stood there with the sun behind me, casting long shadows on the gravel, when I heard a voice. Soft, but with a smirk built into every syllable. "Well, look who's pretending to play developer." I turned slowly. She was exactly as I remembered. Serena, Ethan's mistress. Bronze-tinted glasses, a sleeveless blouse too expensive for this weather, and a smug expression that said she thought this land, and I, were beneath her. She leaned against the rusted remains of the old ice machine, arms crossed like she owned the place. "You really think he'd come back to you now? You're still dragging around that sad little look, always so earnest. That's not what men want." I didn't rise to the bait. I tilted my head instead. "Strange. He told me you were just a phase. A mistake, really. Something he needed to shake off after his dad passed." Her smirk faltered just for a second. I stepped forward slowly, keeping my voice calm. "But even if that's not true, you should enjoy the view while it lasts. Because next month, this so-called pile of dirt will be worth more than your condo. And I'd bet even your shoes." Her eyebrows lifted in mock surprise. "What? Did someone finally find oil under your misery?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I just glanced over at the land where a few engineers were walking with maps and GPS scanners. One of them waved when he saw me. "Wait," she said, straightening slightly. "What's going on here?" I let her question hang in the air. Then I turned, took 3 steps away, and said over my shoulder, "Funny how trash turns to treasure when you're not invited to hold the map." By the time I reached my car, she hadn't moved from her spot. I watched her try to piece it together in her head, that dawning panic when the person you assumed would stay small starts standing taller. Back at home that evening, I sat at the kitchen counter. The house was quiet, just the hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of settling wood. I spread the documents on the counter and slid the final piece into the manila envelope. Inside were 3 things: a copy of the invalid prenup, a notarized statement of my rights, and a single typed note. "Kindly direct any future communication through legal counsel. No threats, no demands, just the facts, and silence. The kind of silence that weighs more than shouting ever could." I sealed it and took a breath. Then I placed the envelope beside the front door, ready to be mailed the next morning. As I turned off the lights and headed upstairs, I thought of Ethan, of Serena, of all the people who had laughed when they left me with nothing but this land. She thought I'd beg. He thought I'd break. But the land they tossed me on, it's about to bury them whole. The courthouse hallway smelled faintly of paper and cleaning fluid. Quiet, sterile, but it pulsed with something that felt oddly electric. Maybe it was just me, or maybe it was the boots I wore, still stained with clay and oil from the old gas station. Maya glanced over as we stepped inside the land records office. My eldest daughter, Reese, walked silently beside me, clutching the manila envelope like it weighed more than just paper. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The clerk behind the plexiglass window looked up, then down at the file in her hands. "Mrs. Blake?" I nodded. She slid the document through the slot with a smile that barely curled one corner of her mouth. "You're just in time. No one else bid. It's yours." I took the pen, signed without hesitation, and pressed my palm against the cool surface of the counter for a second longer than I needed to. Not for dramatic effect, just to feel something grounded. It was done. The land they laughed at, the one they dumped me on like I was trash, was now mine, fully. No shared deed, no silent partner, no Ethan. Outside, the sun had started its slow climb above the courthouse as we walked down the steps. Reese squeezed my hand once, her grip tight and warm. "You ready for the next stop?" Maya asked. I exhaled. "Let's go." The town hall wasn't far, just a 6-minute drive past the diner Ethan once said was too greasy for his clients, and the hardware store he never once entered unless it was to buy beer on a holiday. We arrived just as the zoning board was settling in. The chairs were worn but packed. A few curious heads turned when I stepped in, but I kept my head high. The board opened with dry agenda points: tree ordinances, streetlight replacements, a minor variance on someone's porch. Then came the moment I'd come for. "Next item," the chairman read. "Confirmation of quiet title auction for parcel 14B under dormant clause execution." A murmur swept the room. One man leaned over to his neighbor and whispered, "Wasn't that the Fletcher property?" I said nothing, just opened the folder I brought and slid it onto the table in front of me. The bold red stamp across the top of the first page was clear. Confidential. Doughty Development Plan. Parcel 14B. The board members glanced at one another. One woman, who looked like she could be someone's retired kindergarten teacher, leaned forward. "I think you've got something big there," she said. I nodded once. That's all. The room went still. Then from the back corner, someone stood. An older man from the Heritage Press, the local newspaper. "You're her," he said softly. "The woman they tried to evict. The one with the girls." My lips curled just slightly. "Still standing," I said. Another voice, this time closer. A woman, maybe in her 70s, with silver hair pulled into a bun and a purse balanced on her lap, reached across the aisle and gently touched my arm. "Good for you, honey," she said, her voice warm like soup on a cold night. "You made it. You really did." And just like that, the tide began to shift. They always thought I'd be the one left explaining, pleading, crying in some corner while they paraded around in crisp clothes and empty souls. But there I was, not shouting, not clapping back, just reclaiming, quietly, thoroughly. That evening, after the board meeting, Reese and I stopped for dinner. Nothing fancy, just a booth at a barbecue joint with good hush puppies and sweet tea that hit the spot. She asked if we could get pie. I said yes. We didn't talk about the land, or Ethan, or lawyers. We talked about her college applications and the dog she wanted when we moved into the new place. Later that night, I sat at the kitchen table, the same one I once begged Ethan to help fix when one of the legs wobbled. I opened my laptop. I didn't overthink the email. I simply typed, "Subject, notice body. I believe you'll be receiving a notice of eviction soon. This time, it's your turn to pack. No signature, no threats, just facts." I hovered over the send button for a moment, then clicked, closed the lid. Funny how silence speaks louder than all the noise they used to make, and how the woman they cast aside now holds the keys. I didn't send that email to rattle him. I didn't need to. The words were enough to scratch at whatever nerves he had left. 2 weeks passed. The air thickened like a storm about to break. And on a chilly Monday morning, no different from the one he tossed me out on, I pulled into that gravel driveway, this time in the front seat of a county-marked SUV. My name was no longer scribbled on the mail, but it was about to be printed in bold on the title deed. Maya and my youngest sat quietly in the back seat of my car behind us, watching, waiting. I told them they didn't have to come. But Maya said, "We were there when he locked you out. We're gonna be here when you walk back in." The sheriff stepped out first, his boots crunching the gravel. Then the county official followed, holding a thick file folder under one arm. I took a deep breath and smoothed the sleeves of my coat. Still the same one I wore the day I left. The difference? This time it wasn't wrapped around me for warmth. It was armor. The door opened with a loud creak. Ethan stood in the threshold barefoot, his pajama pants twisted and his hair sticking up like he'd just rolled out of someone else's bed. He blinked, trying to understand the scene before him. Then that familiar smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. Well, if it isn't the ghost of evictions past," he said, arms crossed. I didn't respond. The sheriff stepped forward, handed him the paperwork. "Mr. Fletcher," he said, firm but calm. "This is an executed court order of eviction. You have 30 minutes to vacate." "What the hell is this?" Ethan asked, flipping through the pages. "It's legal," the county official replied, handing him a second document. This property was registered under a dormant clause tied to business use. And since no maintenance or business activity has been documented under your name for 24 consecutive months. "Are you kidding me right now?" Ethan barked, cutting him off. "This is my house." "It was built under a business license," I said, my voice steady, "and the business was dissolved by you." The woman behind him appeared then, the same one I'd seen draped over his arm in town last spring, pretending not to notice me. Her face twisted. "You don't get to just show up and steal what's his," she shrieked, clinging to his arm. "You're just bitter." The sheriff stepped between us. "Ma'am, you'll need to start collecting your things." Ethan's parents came to the door next. His mother looked me up and down with that thin-lipped disdain she wore so often, like disappointment was perfume. "This is absurd," she muttered. You're just trying to humiliate us." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because behind me, Maya stepped out of the car holding a plastic storage crate in her hands. She walked calmly toward the porch and placed it at her father's feet. "For your stuff," she said. "Don't worry, we labeled the boxes." Ethan's jaw clenched. "You really want to do this, Kaylin?" "I'm not the one who left," I said, looking past him. "I'm just cleaning up the mess." The neighbors began to gather, some peeked from behind blinds. Others stood at the edge of the lawn, hands in their jacket pockets, murmuring, "Is that the Fletcher girl? The one they kicked out?" "No, the one who came back." A man I recognized from across the street took out his phone, quietly filming. I saw the red recording light blink. Someone else whispered, "She warned them," quiet but deadly. The mistress came storming down the steps with a suitcase that looked more expensive than my old car. "This is harassment," she screamed, stumbling on the last step. "I'll sue!" The sheriff didn't flinch. "Ma'am, you're welcome to call an attorney," from the sidewalk. Ethan turned to me again, this time the color draining from his face. "Kaylin, please, let's talk. Not like this, not in front of the girls." But I wasn't looking at him. My youngest had stepped out too, small hands clutching the side of my coat. She looked up at me, voice soft. "Can we go home now?" I bent down, smoothed her hair back, and whispered, "We already are." Ethan dropped to his knees as I turned. He reached for the box, then for my hand, like he thought we were still playing by the rules he made. "Please," he choked out, "you don't have to do this." But I kept walking, past the porch, past the pile of shoes that once belonged to me, past the welcome mat his mother had insisted on, with her last name engraved, like I'd never existed here at all. Inside, the house was quiet, hollow. The furniture hadn't changed. The smell of her perfume still hung in the hallway, mixed with stale coffee and something synthetic. I walked straight through, past the kitchen, past the photos on the mantel, where mine had been replaced with one of their dog in a holiday sweater, and there, in the hallway near the stairs, hung the old frame I thought they'd thrown out, my daughters in summer dresses, standing in front of the barn. It had been hidden behind another picture, face down, forgotten. I took it down, dusted it with my sleeve. "This time," I said aloud, "no one hides us." I stood in the middle of that house, once theirs, now mine, and didn't say another word. There was nothing left to prove. I hadn't shouted, I hadn't slammed doors, I hadn't even raised my voice, but every inch of this moment spoke louder than any argument ever could. I didn't rebuild just for revenge. I rebuilt so my daughters would know, we never have to beg for space in someone else's home again. It was early evening when I dipped the brush one last time and drew the final line on the mural. The old gas station's exterior had become a living canvas, colors blooming where oil stains used to be, stories rising from rusted bolts and battered walls. I stepped back, squinting at the golden horizon where the sun slid behind the oak trees. My youngest, Junie, darted past me with a splash of green across her nose and giggled like it was a secret between us. She was barefoot, chasing shadows with a child's freedom that felt sacred. Her laughter echoed off the walls I'd once scrubbed down in silence, walls that now held paint, light, and purpose. The station no longer reeked of gasoline. It smelled like earth, wood shavings, and acrylic paint. New beginnings. We'd turned the attached back room into a studio where kids came to sculpt, draw, and learn without fear of grades or judgment. The cracked asphalt had been replaced with garden beds and benches. Where men used to curse over flat tires, I now watched two teenagers rehearse a poem in sign language. Just past the side fence, someone dropped off a tray of muffins and a box of chalk. Folks came by almost daily now. Some I remembered from the neighborhood, others I didn't. But their presence told me more than their words ever could. They were choosing to be here. That mattered. A minivan pulled up. A man stepped out, mid-40s, with a beard and a soft voice. He held 2 cups of coffee and a curious smile. "You the owner?" he asked, glancing at the mural, a swirl of blues and oranges shaped like flight, freedom. I wiped my palms on my jeans. "Caretaker," I said. "This place doesn't really belong to anyone." He nodded like he understood more than I'd said. "Well, thank you. It's beautiful." Inside, I heard voices rising gently. My oldest, Ilara, had gathered a small group of volunteers, folks who helped patch the roof and sort the donated books. She stood at the old cashier's counter, now a donation desk. Her tone was calm, clear. "My mom didn't just rebuild a building," she said. "She rebuilt a space where people feel seen again. She's the blueprint for what strength looks like: quiet, steady, and not waiting for permission." Somebody clapped. Then more joined in. I didn't turn toward them. Instead, I looked at the shelves we built from repurposed metal beams, the ones Ethan once said weren't worth saving. That name hadn't crossed my lips in weeks, but when I stepped outside again, I saw him, at a distance, standing across the street, hands in his pockets, half shadowed by the tree line. Alone. He didn't approach. Just stood there, watching, maybe wondering what it felt like to build something from scratch, to be needed not for control but for care. Our eyes met for a breath. I didn't flinch, didn't smile, didn't wave. I simply turned my back to him and reached for the crate of garden tools waiting by the door. Moments later, Deputy Harlan pulled up in his pickup. He gave me a respectful nod and handed me a sealed box. "Archives," he said. "From the county. Found a bunch of records about the station. Turns out it dates back further than we thought. This land's got history and heritage." I accepted it with both hands. He tipped his hat and drove off without fuss. The breeze picked up, rattling the tin wind chimes above the awning. Those had been made from the old station signs Junie insisted we keep. Later that night, once the last car had gone and the sun had bowed out completely, I sat alone inside with the ledger open on the desk. The place felt full, not with noise, but with meaning. Every corner held a memory now, shaped by our hands. Ilara came in, barefoot like her sister, hair tied in a loose braid. She looked at me quietly, then asked, "Mom, will this place be mine someday?" I didn't answer right away. I closed the ledger, placed my hand gently over hers. "If you build it with love, not fear, then yes," I said. She smiled in a way that reminded me of my grandmother, strong, soft, and rooted. A wind brushed through the door we kept propped open, always open. The chimes sang again. Outside, Junie was sleeping on the porch swing with a sketchpad on her lap. Crayons scattered around her like confetti. I covered her with the denim quilt we'd stitched last winter from old jeans and workshop rags. She stirred but didn't wake. Standing under the porch light, I let my eyes drift to the sky. It was wide and velvet dark. The kind of sky you could rebuild under even after you've lost everything. Have you ever had to rebuild your life from ashes, without applause, without backup, just because it was the only way forward? If so, this story was for you.